Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Anders and thank you so much for inviting me today. I am associate professor at the ethnology at the department Saxo Institute at the Faculty of Humanities at University of Copenhagen, just to get that straight. But I'm also very much involved in a lot of collaborative research on especially health-related issues and the aging processes. And as Anders just told, I'm involved in a large consortium on obesity research. Okay, so just to introduce the project, this is a large consortium. It's called Governing Obesity. And as the name says, it's very much focused on involved in research about obesity. So, well, it's what you could call a grand societal challenge. There is what has been dubbed an obesity epidemic at the moment. Not only in the industrialized part of the world, but globally. So there's a large call for research in understanding the causes and consequences and how to counteract obesity. In that sense, that's what this consortium is also all about. It's a project that presents itself as looking into what an obesogenic environment could be and is and look like. Obesogenic environment is a term that was coined in 1999 by one of the world leading obesity researchers, and has been very influencing in how we understand the causes of and consequences of obesity. And in that sense, this term we thought would be nice to scrutinize a bit more in order to fully understand why it is such a key term, what to do about it, and do we actually know what we mean when we talk about obesogenic environment. And at least one point from the Datasprinting is that no, we don't know what we're talking about when we talk about obesogenic environment. And that is, for an obesity researchers like me, very interesting. Okay, so the Governing Obesity is a quite huge consortium. It's funded by internal money from the University of Copenhagen, but it kind of spans different 5 faculties and 12 different departments and researchers from biomedical field, clinical field, social science, law, and humanities where I am. It's also built up in different work packages, and I'm not going into them, but the 2, 3, and 4 work packages are very much involved in intervention studies, and they kind of intervene in people's everyday life and obesity-related issues. And then we have a work package 1, which is a more philosophical work package, looking at the societal framings and consequences, discussing in that sense. And then the work package 5, that I'm heading, looking into what the consortium looks like, what are they doing. And one of the things that we are allowed to do in Work Package 5, which is actually quite unique and not something you see often in research projects, is that we are allowed to experiment, not in a lab as such or doing standardized operating procedures experiments as you will often see in research, but actually work more like playing on a playground. And in that sense, what we are all about in this work package fit very well together with the aims of the Techno-Anthropology lab. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we came up with the idea that it could be so interesting trying to do a explorative experiment, as we have called it in our application, together with the people at the Techno-Anthropology lab. Okay. So why a data sprint on obesogenic environment? Well, it is a key explanatory framework for obesity research, and it's also a key point of departure for the whole Governing Obesity consortium. But we're also very interested in looking in how is it used and defined and developed within obesity research. And we were also very interested in whether a scientific concept like obesogenic environment actually also you're able to work with it in everyday life contexts. So we had these 2 main questions about the scientific understanding of obesogenic environment and also how to go about that concept if you want to look at people's everyday life practices. Another kind of key or core part of doing this data sprint was actually to work across different types of methods. I'm a humanistic researcher. I work qualitatively. I use ethnographic methods in my own field, and to work with digital methods and harvest large data set, and just for me, just go into pay an interest in Facebook and Instagram was completely new endeavor. So this methodological aspect of doing a data sprint, trying to work very much across different methods, were very inspiring and very interesting. So it was a large data sample, and it was access to work with social media as a lens into looking into everyday life practice that kind of urged us into this experiment as well. Okay, so the data sprint went on for 4 days in this October. So it's very recent, and we're still working on what came out of that data sprint. But as the film also showed you, it's consisting of different types of researchers, and you could also invite different types of stakeholders. In this concept of a very research-based data sprint, our stakeholders were obesity researchers as such. And we were so lucky to have some of the most prominent obesity researchers in the world actually participating as issue experts at this data sprint. And then we had, so we kind of divided into two separate groups: people, researchers from cultural analysis and obesity research, and then the researchers from the Techno-Anthropology lab. So we have this very broad mix of competences involved in the data sprint. And it was extremely confusing and extremely rewarding at the same time. Yeah, I have 3 minutes, but I will use a bit more. Okay, the data sprint had 6 sub-projects, and when I go, I will just only talk about one of them. And as I just said, we're still working on what to do with all the information and data we gathered, and what would the next step be. But we were also presented with roadmaps from our project managers that we were sort of, at the one hand, we should align to and adhere to, and on the other hand, we were kind of obligated to be extremely, we didn't care about them in the run of the data sprint. So it was also very interesting to work with a roadmap that you're supposed to follow, but not supposed to follow anyhow. But I think that's part of the playground frame for doing a data sprint. So if you just go into what we kind of gained from a research perspective from this data sprint, the obesogenic environment in obesity research, that was just one of 6 themes that we were working on. But we know that obesogenic environment is extremely important in obesity research. But where exactly is it located, that concept? And when is it? How has it been developed, this concept? And what does it come together with when you talk about obesogenic environment? And these are all about scientific knowledge and production of scientific knowledge, but scientific knowledge that has a huge impact on what to do, where to get money, who to talk to, what types of research questions you are allowed to ask when you do obesity research. So it has very large impact on obesity research as such, and therefore also large impact on how we grasp and understand obesity. Okay, so what is talked about? That was a first base map. And before we started the data sprint, the researchers at the Techno-Anthropology lab had been harvesting a huge pile of data from all types of sources. And we were also working a bit ahead of the data sprint. So we had one student snowballing a sampling of scientific papers and policy documents that we used to create this base map. And we started using some of our issue experts in order to name the clusters that appeared when you did this base. So you have 359 scientific papers and policy documents on obesity that uses the word obesogenic environment. And then it comes out clustering in some sort. And then we try to find out the names of the different clusters. So what is talked about was one way of of working with the sample. This is Daniel Jacek, professor from Oxford, one of the world-leading obesity researchers from the social science humanities part. He then went into a room on his own, working all the documents and scientific papers, going through all the documents and trying to find out who did the talking. So it's another type of naming the material we had. So we had what is talked about, who does the talking. This one, this is not from the Datasprint. This is a previous map. It's a Foresight Report, and that's a government of the UK that in all sorts of areas and themes ask a whole pile of their prominent researchers to do evidence-based assessment of a specific topic. And then they write up a report, and that report guides the policy in that area. So in 2007, the Foresight Report came with this model of obesity. In the middle you have energy balance, what you eat and what you use is kind of the balance. If you eat too much and not exercising enough, you get fat, and if you eat less and exercise too much, you get very thin. So that's the energy balance, and that's kind of just lots and lots and lots of obesity research takes that as the point of departure for the research. Now, recently, is a highly contested concept, if it makes sense at all to have that as a point of departure for obesity research at all. And then we have a lot of different clusters coming around, and we'll just go back to what this map really is. But it's a very strong contrast to the maps that we produced in the Datasprint. This is what it's called a heat map, I was told, and the more technical questions you will have for this map, not pose them to me, but to some of the people from the Techno-Anthropology lab. But one of the things that we could see is that this is a map showing before and after the Foresight Report. So you have one map on your left, what happened before, and this is a specific part of obesity research, obesity science, or animal models, where you use mouse or rats or whatever to study obesity. And what you can see happened was before they kind of clustered, it's the reddish part of it, it was kind of in one place. After the Foresight Report, it has moved into all other sorts of scientific areas, these animal models. So one effect, and one hypothesis that we could ask for future Datasprint is, did the Foresight Report produce this movement of one specific scientific approach into new fields? Very interesting. I know another very interesting thing, but this is a map showing all of the documents, not a before and after map. But what you can see from them is a completely different visualization of obesity research compared to the Foresight mind map. And as the film also told you, there's kind of two environments going on in obesity research. We have the mothering environment, you know, the before birth of a child, with how the mom behaves before she even gets pregnant is extremely important to some of the researchers in order whether or not the child will be obese. And then you have the other environment like food, policy, marketing, geography, socioeconomic status, and that's a completely other version of environment. And these two environments just don't add up, and it doesn't fit to the Foresight model. So one of the preliminary insights we got out of this Datasprint is that the Foresight model is a politically induced model of science, trying to create a coherent, all-encompassing model of obesity. What the Datasprint showed us that you don't have one coherent, all-encompassing model of obesity. You have at least two very different concepts of environment, and it don't fit to the Foresight model. And you might have an idea that what the Foresight model and what our issue experts told us was it added up to the political department in the UK government. So actually, the Foresight model is a political mind map of the political departments and how they should approach obesity less than a scientific insight into obesity. Okay, so the next step from my part, if the people from Techno-Anthropology wants to continue playing with me, is actually to produce a new and better sample in order to challenge our initial findings, figuring out whether or not the questions that we are enabled to ask now is the right questions. So we would go for a new sample, and then we actually have promised each other that we will work on publications. It's a research collaboration we have here. So of course one of the endpoints or products should be scientific papers. Producing new and better maps, and perhaps also have obesity data sprint in the spring. Why? I was asked to, finally, why? Well, it is actually a new and very promising methodology, and it challenges my and our in obesity research taken for granted methodological practices and also conceptual assumption. We thought we knew we were talking about when we talked about environment. Now we know we don't at all know what environment is all about. And it also provides a room or a playground framework for wild experimentation, and it goes beyond our comfort zone. And that is so rare these days in science, that you actually are playing outside your comfort zone. And then what's really intensive, I think, never since my PhD days, I've been working so intensively and so concentrated on one issue for so many hours, and then again on top of it together with so many people. So it was collaborative and it was great fun. Thank you.